what if true success isn't simply about, how much you accumulate, but maybe how much you multiply?
Hmm.
And what if the key to unlocking that kind of massive lasting impact is hidden in an ancient strategy, one we often overlook today?
That's a really provocative way to start.
Well, if that idea sparks your curiosity, you're in the right place. Welcome to our deep dive today. We're looking into sustainable growth, reproduction within communities.
Yeah, and we're drawing heavily on the core ideas from the book, from seed to harvest, building churches that last, grow, and multiply by Chris Arvelasis.
Exactly. So our mission really is to unpack this whole idea of multiplication.
Right. We want to explore why the book argues it's, well, the most effective strategy, how it actually works on the ground, and what it means for anyone, really, who's interested in fostering resilient movements, communities that govern themselves and leave a genuine legacy.
It's getting to the heart of how communities don't just get bigger, but truly reproduce and transform things.
Precisely. It's a fundamental shift in thinking for many.
Okay, so the book kicks off with a pretty bold claim. It says sustainable church planting is the most effective biblical strategy for fulfilling what it calls a great commission. Can you unpack that? Why planting? Why not just say building up the groups we already have?
That's a great question because it really gets to the core thesis. The book argues that genuine, sustainable church planting focused on reproduction, not just adding numbers, is the most impactful way.
Okay.
It's about cultivating healthy indigenous communities, rooted in their own culture, designed from the start to then reproduce themselves. It frames this as key to fulfilling that Great Commission idea, that core mandate in many traditions to, spread the message globally.
And what's really striking is the contrast the book draws, between how things often look today, big programs praying for revival inside familiar walls, and the early church model.
Hmm.
That explosive growth described in Acts, it wasn't about bigger buildings, was it?
Not at all. Its growth was fueled by this relentless, outward-focused movement, sending people out, believers going into new places, starting fresh fellowships.
Right.
The book calls it a dynamic organism, not a static institution. It was inherently built for movement, for multiplication, not just maintaining the status quo.
So if that's the blueprint, what's the risk if we don't follow it? The book talks about movement over maintenance. That sounds pretty critical, like staying still is actually dangerous.
It is. The idea is that stagnation, no matter how comfortable it feels, can slowly suffocate a community's mission. It suggests that just maintaining things, keeping the lights on, isn't enough. It can actually kill the outward impulse.
So why should this matter to you, listening right now? I mean, these implications seem pretty big, maybe bigger than just one religious context.
They really are profound. Think about it in a few ways. First, cultural transformation. When communities spring up organically within a culture, they're way better positioned to tackle local issues, social, economic, moral problems. They become actual agents of change.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, generational impact. If you invest in multiplying leaders, you're ensuring core values get passed down faithfully, generation after generation. It builds a real legacy.
Right.
And third, just thinking about global mission or impact reproducing communities naturally create new outposts. The reach expands organically, like ripples in a pond, far beyond where it started.
Okay, let's drill down into this seed idea then. When the book says church planting, it's clearly not just about, construction projects or opening new branches. How does it define this planting? What kind of seed is it?
That's a really crucial distinction. It defines church planting as a strategic, spirit-led process. Communities of faith are cultivated, like tending a garden.
Cultivate it, okay.
They're seen as living, breathing things rooted deeply in their own cultural soil. It's much more organic than just, say, launching a franchise.
And this brings us right back to that core difference, doesn't it? Multiplication, not just addition. Why should you, our listener, care about this difference? What makes multiplication supposedly so much better?
Well, think of it like this. Addition is just increasing members in one place, one community. It's linear growth. It's limited by that one group's capacity.
Right, eventually hit a ceiling.
Exactly. But multiplication follows a reproductive model. Imagine one healthy group intentionally helping start another healthy group, which then starts another one.
Ah, okay.
Over time, that leads to exponential growth. It's organic. It's sustainable. You're birthing new communities that can also reproduce. It creates a whole network, not just one big entity.
That is a huge difference. Okay, so if that's the what, let's talk how. The book apparently lays out a pretty structured approach, a journey. What's the roadmap look like?
It does outline clear phases. First is preparation. That's all about prayer and just establishing relational presence being there.
Okay.
Then comes entry. That involves sharing the core message, but in a way that fits the context,
Yeah.
contextualized proclamation.
Makes sense.
Next is disciple making, and it's focused on obedience-based training, learning by doing. After that, formation. That's the shift from just being an informal group to becoming a functioning church. Then, super important, leadership development, equipping locals.
Local leaders, key for sustainability.
Absolutely. Which leads into multiplication and exit strategies. The parent group helps birth new ones, empowers them, and eventually steps back.
Right, so they can stand on their own.
Exactly. And finally, there's sustaining momentum and health over the long haul. It's not a one-off project.
And within all that, the book points to four foundational pillars. What are those, and why are they so critical for a reproducing community specifically?
Yeah, these aren't just suggestions. The book presents them as non-negotiables for this kind of outward multiplying growth. First, prayer. That's the anchor, grounding everything in, well, spiritual power and purpose.
Okay.
Second, presence. Really immersing yourself in the community, building trust, understanding the fabric of life there.
Being with people, not just talking at them.
Exactly. Third, proclamation. Keeping the core message central. Clear, compelling, but adaptable. Unwavering on the core, flexible on the delivery.
Got it.
And fourth, preparation. Equipping everyone involved, wisdom, strategy, and just plain perseverance for what's usually a long journey. They're the bedrock.
And practically speaking, what principles actually drive this forward? How do you ensure these new communities don't just, pop up and fizzle out, but actually thrive and multiply?
Well, the book hits on several key principles. You need to disciple and equip believers right from the start. Train them in actual ministry skills, not just theory.
Hands-on.
Very hands-on. Also, contextualize the gospel. Adapt communication, worship styles, whatever fits the culture, but without watering down the core truth. That's a fine line.
Tricky balance, yeah.
Definitely. Then, build relational bridges. It emphasizes genuine friendship and service as the way to earn the right to be heard.
Makes sense.
Crucially, empower local leadership. Sustainability absolutely hinges on leaders rising up from within that community. You can't rely on outsiders forever.
That seems obvious, but probably hard to do in practice, letting go.
It is. And finally, commit to long-term presence. This isn't a quick fix. It's framed as a marathon, not a sprint. You got to be in it for the long haul.
Okay, this next part really shifts the perspective, the DNA of a reproducing community. The book uses this analogy. Moving from seeing a community as a reservoir static, holding resources measured by size, to seeing it as a river.
Yeah, a flowing, multiplying force.
It suggests success isn't how much water you hold, but how much life flows out.
That reservoir to river idea, it really does change how you think about success, doesn't it? But is this idea, this constant reproduction, is it really rooted in, say, ancient texts? Or is it more of a modern spin for faster growth? What's the book's case for the biblical roots?
That's a fair question. The book argues it's fundamental, woven right into ancient teachings. Think about the creation mandate. Genesis says right at the start, be fruitful and multiply, a literal call to reproduce.
Okay, yeah.
Then, look at Jesus' ministry. He didn't just gather crowds. He poured into 12 disciples, trained them meticulously to go out and replicate his process, sent them out in pairs, empowered them.
Right, the sending part is key.
Absolutely. And the early church's embodiment in Acts, their growth wasn't just adding seats in Jerusalem, it was new communities constantly forming as disciples were empowered and sent out. Acts 2, for example, that picture of them sharing life, teaching, praying it, says the Lord added to their number daily, but that energy also fueled the outward push.
So it's both growth and sending. And from that, the book pulls out these 7 core traits, like the genetic code for a healthy reproducing community. These are the things that allow a group not just to survive, but to effectively make copies of itself.
Okay, let's unpack that DNA. If a community is really multiplying, what are these core traits? First up, Bible-rooted. What does that mean for multiplication?
Bible-rooted isn't just, having study groups. It's about anchoring every new community, every offshoot, in a shared, non-negotiable understanding of truth derived from Scripture.
So it provides consistency.
Exactly. It prevents drift as things multiply. It's like the unchanging blueprint for every new seed planted.
Got it. Next, authentic and fellowship koinonia. That sounds deeper than just coffee hour.
Oh, much deeper. Koinonia in the original language describes this radical, almost covenantal sharing of life.
Covenantal.
Yeah, like a deep commitment, not just showing up when it's convenient. It involves spiritual connection, emotional support, even sharing material resources like we read about in Acts 2. You need those strong bonds internally to launch strong, cohesive new units.
Okay. Following that, servant-led, how does leadership style impact multiplication?
Well, servant-led means leaders are humble, focused on serving and equipping others, not dominating. This is critical because it empowers new leaders to emerge naturally within the multiplying groups. That's how they become self-sufficient and can repeat the process themselves.
Makes sense. Then clear and witness. Why is clarity so vital for reproduction?
Well, clear and witness is about articulating the core message effectively with clarity, conviction, but also cultural sensitivity. If the message itself isn't clear and easily reproducible, how can it be passed on faithfully to new groups, new cultures? It's like the message's own DNA needs to be stable.
Good point. Fifth trait. A missional posture. Sounds like mission isn't just one department.
Exactly. Mission becomes the core identity, not just a program you opt into. Every single member is seen as sent into their everyday life, their sphere of influence. That naturally expands the reach and creates opportunities for new communities to spark.
Okay. Next, global envision.
Global envision means thinking beyond your own backyard, embracing the mission for all peoples, all nations, transcending local boundaries. This just widens the potential scope for multiplication, stopping it from getting stuck in one place.
Right, keeps the outward focus. And finally, prayer saturated.
Yeah, this is presented as the spiritual engine, the ignition for multiplication. Consistent, fervent prayer, like in Acts 13, where they prayed and fasted before sending out Barnabas and Saul, is seen as essential for getting guidance and power for the whole multiplication process.
That's a really compelling picture of the DNA. Now, let's shift to the architect's heart. Because this kind of organic growth, it doesn't just happen randomly, does it? The book argues it needs deliberate, intentional design, like a builder.
It absolutely does. And the book uses this powerful analogy of God as the ultimate architect. Think about Genesis 1, the creation account. It wasn't chaos, it was ordered, phased, intentional.
Right, step by step.
Or the super detailed plans for the tabernacle in Exodus. The point is, planning isn't seen as restricting the Spirit. It's presented as a sacred framework for cooperating with the Spirit. It fosters faithfulness, not just a rigid formula.
That's a good distinction because it's so easy to fall into what the book calls the activity trap. Just
Yep.
being busy, mistaking motion for progress. You can run around doing a lot, but without that blueprint, that intentional design, you might just be spinning your wheels, right? Leading to burnout and losing sight of the goal.
Precisely. The book points to Nehemiah rebuilding Jerusalem's walls. He didn't just rush in. He assessed, he planned, he delegated. His faith was expressed through that strategic approach. It turns scattered efforts into a unified, achievable goal. Intentional design is critical for big undertakings.
This brings up that idea of the silent season, the preparation and presence phase. That unseen work must be incredibly tough, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you don't see immediate results.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult,
Yeah.
especially today in our culture that demands instant results. But the book highlights this recurring pattern in Scripture. Foundation before fruition.
Yeah.
Think about Moses, 40 years in Midian before confronting Pharaoh. Joseph, 13 years as a slave and prisoner before rising to power. David, years as a shepherd before becoming king. Even Jesus, 30 years of obscurity before his public ministry.
Wow, yeah. That's a long time waiting.
But the waiting isn't wasted time. It's the intense shaping period, forging character, deepening roots, preparing the person or the community for what's coming.
And the book really hammers home that presence precedes proclamation. Using Jesus as the example, he didn't just beam in for speeches. John's gospel says he dwelt among us, lived with people.
Yes, and that highlights a core truth. Our message, our proclamation, gains authority and power when it comes out of shared life, out of real presence and trust built over time.
So cutting corners here is dangerous.
Extremely. Rushing past that prep work, that silent season of presence and foundation building. The book warns it leads to shallow roots, fragile leaders, ministries that might look flashy for a bit but crumble under pressure. The deeper the foundation of prayer and presence, the higher the insect can ultimately go and the longer it lasts.
Okay, so how does this play out practically? Cultivating disciples who can actually reproduce. The book talks about moving from new believer to reproducing disciple. It stresses obedience-based discovery, like you learn by doing.
Right. Jesus didn't just lecture. He sent his disciples out almost immediately to practice what they'd learned. Discipleship is presented as experiential.
And it emphasizes integration from the outset, meaning evangelism, ministry, they aren't separate add-ons later. They're woven into the life of a disciple right away.
Exactly. New believers aren't just passive learners. They're immediately equipped and encouraged to act on their faith, share what they're experiencing right from day one.
And the place for this to happen. Small groups as laboratories.
hmm These are seen as the ideal proving ground for this kind of hands-on discipleship, a place for immediate engagement, accountability, practical application, where faith, gets its hands dirty.
And to help structure that, there's the group covenant. What's that about?
It's basically a tool, a way for the group to establish clear, shared commitments to things like prayer, obedience, sharing their faith, serving, holding each other accountable. It creates a dedicated space for faith to become really practical and prepares people for deeper involvement.
Okay, so you have these committed small groups. How does the transition happen from group to church? Formalizing the fellowship, the ecclesia. There's a sacred tension there, the book says,
Yep.
between intimacy and organization.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, moving from that close-knit relational feel to something more intentionally organized for sustainability and mission, without losing the spirit-led flexibility.
And leadership is key here.
Absolutely. There's a strong focus on leadership identification and apprenticeship. The book stresses finding leaders based on character first, like in 1 Timothy 3 or Titus 1. They're seen as God-ordained shepherds emerging from the community, not just appointing based on skill, but on proven faithfulness. That ensures resilient leadership for the long haul, capable of leading new movements.
And the whole point of formalization, it's not just about rules and structure.
No, not about creating bureaucracy or red tape. The book frames it as building a necessary scaffold, a structure that supports multiplication, outreach, deeper discipleship. It makes the vision visible, provides pathways for growth, and creates something genuinely reproducible.
Okay, now shifting gears slightly to strategic seed sowing. The book introduces a really interesting concept, the person of peace. What is that?
This idea comes from Luke chapter 10. A person of peace is basically someone God has already prepared in a community, someone who is open, influential, and whose welcome essentially unlocks access to their whole network of relationships.
So it's like finding a key connector.
Exactly. It shifts outreach from cold calling, essentially, to warm invitations. The message spreads more naturally through existing relationships. Finding that person can be a game changer for entry into a new community.
That's fascinating. And related to that is the artistry of proclamation. It's not just dumping information.
Not at all. It's presented like a craft.
Yeah.
Jesus is the master example of contextual seed sowing. It means listening first, understanding the soil of the culture, people's hopes, fears before you speak.
Knowing your audience.
Deeply. And then using stories, analogies, connecting with hearts and minds in ways that resonate. Like Paul in Athens in Acts 17, referencing their own poets and altars. It's tailoring the message without compromising it, so it's heard, understood, and more likely to be accepted, and then passed on.
This all sounds like a really powerful organic strategy. But surely it's not all smooth sailing. What kind of challenges does the book warn about? What pitfalls might start this multiplication?
That's a really important reality check. Every strategy faces hurdles. The book definitely highlights several pitfalls. First, that busyness trap we mentioned earlier, mistaking activity for actual spiritual health or progress towards multiplication.
Right. Lots of programs, but no new groups starting.
Exactly. The counter is intentionality, constantly asking, does this activity actually contribute to making disciples who make disciples and planting communities that plant communities?
Yeah.
Or is it just maintaining what we have?
Okay, what else?
There's a fear of loss and control. That's a big human one, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Fearing you'll lose influence or resources or people if you genuinely empower leaders and send them out to start something new.
So how do you overcome that?
The book suggests it requires a real mindset shift from ownership to stewardship, seeing new communities not as losses, but as gains for the bigger picture. Trusting the process, even when it means letting go, that takes faith.
And then there's institutional inertia and cultural resistance. Old habits die hard, right? Challenging established norms can be tough.
Very tough. Both internal resistance within an existing community and potential opposition from the wider culture. The book stresses patience here, persistent vision casting, constantly communicating the why, celebrating the small multiplication wins, and just building consensus over time. It's often a slow burn.
The book also warns about over-reliance on events versus process, calling it the festival fallacy. What's that?
That's the temptation to measure success by big, splashy events,
Yeah.
a big outreach weekend or conference.
Yeah, they feel successful, lots of energy.
They can feel great and might have a role, but the fallacy is thinking the event itself equals lasting change or multiplication. Often, there's no deep relational follow-up needed for real discipleship and reproduction. The book pushes for focusing on the consistent, often slower, process of relational discipleship over just chasing the next big event.
Okay, one more pitfall. Ignoring critical mass. What does that mean?
It means that sustainable reproduction needs more than just one or two passionate people. You need to cultivate enough committed, reproducing disciples to reach a kind of spiritual tipping point.
Tipping point.
Yeah, enough people to form a core group that can actually function as a self-sustaining organism with its own worship, life, and mission. Trying to multiply too soon, before you have that critical mass of deeply discipled people, can lead to the new group just collapsing because it doesn't have a strong enough core. It's about ensuring the seed is viable before planting it out on its own.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up. This deep dive really presents multiplication as this compelling, maybe even essential blueprint for transformative impact. It definitely challenges us to think differently, moving from just maintaining things to fostering a dynamic reproducing movement.
It absolutely does. It's about a fundamental shift in mindset, isn't it? And then in our actions, moving from accumulation to intentional generative reproduction, which leads us to that final thought for you, our listener.
Right. If your greatest impact isn't ultimately measured by what you build yourself, but by what you help reproduce, then what's one step, maybe just one small step you could take this week to begin shifting your focus, moving even slightly from addition towards exponential multiplication?